I'm Morgan Bennett, 29, the daughter of the late Richard Bennett, founder of Bennett Technologies. Today was meant to be my opportunity to preserve Dad's legacy at this urgent board meeting. Instead, I'm standing outside the boardroom door, staring at my stepbrother Brandon's smug grin. "Apologies, this meeting's reserved for stakeholders only," he said smugly, blocking my entry. I grinned and held up my phone, a flawless moment to reveal who truly owns this corporation. If this tale is keeping you intrigued, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Tap that like icon, subscribe to the page, and let's uncover how I turned the game around on my plotting stepfamily. My father, Richard Bennett, was a visionary who created Bennett Technologies from scratch, with just an idea and a $10,000 loan from his college pal. I was raised watching him grow that modest tech venture into a $200 million enterprise that transformed financial security platforms. My earliest memories include weekend trips to his workplace, sitting on his lap as he explained advanced business concepts in terms even my young brain could digest. My mom, Elizabeth, was his foundation during those tough early days, but cancer claimed her when I was only 8. From that point, it was just Dad and me, facing the world together. For 4 years, we adapted to a new routine. He reshaped his schedule to attend my soccer matches and science exhibits, and I learned to whip up basic meals for dinner. We were a unit. That all changed when I was 12, and Dad encountered Elaine Harper at a charity fundraiser. She was elegant, refined, and brought 2 kids along, Brandon, then 15, and Ashley, 10. Dad fell head over heels, certain we'd form one united, cheerful household. Half a year later, they tied the knot, and our peaceful home became a hub of fresh voices and unfamiliar habits. I genuinely tried to embrace them. But Elaine always kept me at arm's length, subtly making sure I knew I wasn't her daughter. Brandon was bluntly antagonistic, bitter about the attention his new stepfather gave me. Only Ashley sometimes showed honest attempts to bond, though even she quickly fell in line with her mother and brother's attitudes. Despite the domestic friction, Dad kept nurturing my business interest. When I expressed my desire to follow in his path, his face lit up with joy. He nurtured my love for numbers and inventive problem-solving, often telling coworkers, "Morgan's got that Bennett knack for business. She sees paths where others see obstacles." His faith fueled my effort. I finished high school as valedictorian, then earned my business degree from Morton, focusing on finance and product strategy. During school breaks, I interned across multiple departments at Bennett Technologies, mastering operations from the ground up instead of leaning on family ties. "I'm proud that you're willing to earn your place," Dad told me during senior year. "Too many successors want the top role without learning the roots." Once I graduated, I joined full-time as a product development associate, eventually becoming creative director by 27. In the workplace, Dad never gave me special perks. If anything, he was stricter with me than others. But over private dinners, he'd lay out his vision for the company's future, with me obviously included. "Someday," he'd say, swirling his glass of scotch, "this will be in capable hands. I've made sure of that." I assumed he meant mine. I should have asked him to confirm. 8 months ago, Dad collapsed from a massive heart attack during a board session. He passed before paramedics could even reach him. The suddenness crushed me. One day, he was a vibrant 62-year-old with no health alarms. The next, he was gone. A week after the funeral, the will reading felt like reliving that loss. Elaine was granted 40% of the shares. Brandon received 15%, Ashley 10%. I got Dad's residence, personal items, and a trust fund that secured my finances, but left me no further stake in the firm besides the 5% he'd gifted me at 25. I sat speechless, in the lawyer's office, struggling to comprehend. Had I misread those heartfelt talks about the future? Did I somehow let him down without noticing? These doubts haunted me for weeks as I drifted through grief like a shell. Even amid pain and bewilderment, I chose to remain at the company. It was my final link to Dad, and I still stood by the tech we produced. I poured myself into work, aiming to protect his vision through my effort, not through shares. But after the will was disclosed, Bennett Technologies' dynamics transformed. Immediately, Elaine stepped in as chairwoman, though she'd never taken an active role before. Brandon, who had stagnated in middle management due to lackluster output, was suddenly promoted to COO. Even Ashley, whose primary task had been managing our social accounts, became head of communications. I retained my creative director title, but was slowly excluded from vital decisions. At first, it was minor. Meetings shifted last minute without alerting me. My emails went unanswered or arrived too late. But over time, the exclusion became outright and shameless. "We're simplifying the decision-making chain," Elaine said smoothly when I asked why I'd been removed from the product committee I once led. "Too many contributors spoil the mix, don't you think?" I could hear Dad's advice echoing. "Be calculated. Pick your moments carefully." So I swallowed my disappointment and concentrated on my circle of influence. I still had loyal team members and my department to lead. I'd prove my worth through execution, not by whining. But as months dragged on, it was clear. My step-family wasn't just sidelining me. They were deliberately eroding my father's legacy, piece by piece. By the half-year mark following Dad's passing, coming to the office felt like entering hostile territory. My step-family had perfected the art of subtle sabotage, staying just under the radar of HR violations. Brandon, in particular, became adept at underhanded tactics during team sessions. Each time I pitched ideas, he'd loudly sigh or glance at his watch. "Interesting concept, Morgan," he'd say with a smirk, but perhaps a bit simplistic. "We need ideas that address the broader framework." He never defined this broader framework. Obviously, his aim wasn't to refine my input, but to belittle me, and through me, Dad's legacy. Ashley wasn't as subtle. She misused the company's internal chat system to accidentally reply, all with messages mocking my proposals. Once, after I invested weeks crafting a new user interface, she sent a company-wide email featuring a meme likening my layout to a child's doodle. She immediately said sorry, claiming it was meant for a private chat. But the harm was irreversible. My team saw their leader publicly mocked by the communication head. Elaine played the long game. As chairwoman, she had power over board scheduling, conveniently timing crucial talks when I was away on business trips or locked into client commitments. When I asked for adjustments, she'd respond with exaggerated concern. "Oh, Morgan, if only you had said something sooner. Everything's finalized." The exclusion stretched beyond meetings. I was slowly removed from important emails and decision chains. Projects I spearheaded were transferred with no reasoning. My budget was slashed by 30%, even as other departments saw gains. Not everyone joined in the cold shoulder tactics. Thomas Wright, our CFO and Dad's lifelong friend, stood by me. Though his influence couldn't override my stepfamily's collective vote power, he offered private advice and occasionally backed me during sessions. "Your father would be disgusted by this," he told me over one of our secret lunches offsite. "But he'd also tell you to bide your time and keep watching. Things are rarely what they seem on the surface." Diana Reed, our VP of Marketing and someone Dad hired a decade ago, also supported me. She'd discreetly forward emails I'd been left off and tip me off about backdoor plans. Her role was shakier than Thomas's, though. She lacked his seniority and board ties. Through Diana, I uncovered the mysterious project overhaul that Elaine and Brandon kept discussing behind closed doors. The details were limited, but it seemed to suggest major alterations to the company's leadership and future course. My suspicions deepened when I overheard Brandon talking to Elaine just outside the executive restroom. "Morgan's becoming a liability," he muttered in a hushed tone. "She's digging too deep into the transition." Elaine replied coldly, "She'll be irrelevant soon enough. Once the Reynolds acquisition is finalized, we'll eliminate her entire division." Reynolds Corp. The name hit me like a blow. They were infamous corporate raiders, known for swooping in on companies, stripping away assets, and leaving behind empty husks. Their favorite targets? Family-run businesses experiencing leadership changes. The idea of my father's company, his legacy, being torn apart by them made my stomach turn. That night, I stayed behind at the office, poring over every bit of public information I could find on Reynolds Corp. The pattern was always the same. They'd quietly acquire controlling shares, place loyalists in high-ranking roles, siphon off intellectual property, saddle the company with debt, and then let it collapse. Employees? Gone. Investors? Wiped out. Communities? Devastated. Meanwhile, Reynolds executives would walk away rich, unaffected. The following morning, I marched into Thomas's office, documents in hand. "I had a feeling," he said after scanning through the pages, "but the information they've shared with the board has been vague at best. Elaine keeps repeating that it's only preliminary talks. Still, I've seen Reynolds reps here 3 times this month." "We can't let this happen," I said. Thomas frowned. "Together, Elaine, Brandon, and Ashley control 65% of the voting rights. You've got 5%, I have 3%. We're far from a majority." "What about the other board members?" I asked. "Surely they'd oppose a deal with vultures like Reynolds." He sighed. "They trust Elaine. She's Richard's widow. And Reynolds is masterful at sugarcoating things. They'll promise growth, expansion, job retention. It's all lies, but they're convincing lies." Over the following weeks, I dug deeper and tried to rally allies within upper management, but the atmosphere shifted around me. My access badge stopped working in half the building. My assistant was suddenly reassigned. Old colleagues avoided my eyes in the halls, treating me like someone already halfway out the door. The breaking point came when I attempted to access projected financials for the upcoming quarterly review. My login failed. "Who locked me out?" I asked the IT manager. He glanced away. "Orders came from the COO's office. I'm really sorry, Morgan." That night, I sat alone at my desk, resignation letter half written on my screen, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Thomas, emergency board meeting scheduled for Friday morning. "Reynolds execs will be there. This is happening sooner than expected. Are they disclosing the real purpose?" I texted back. "Only to board members and shareholders. Elaine insisted you're not allowed in the room. I'm sorry." And just like that, the company my father spent decades building would be sold, gutted by opportunists, and I wouldn't even be allowed to witness it. All of his years of dedication, all of our employees' loyalty and sacrifice, gone. Betrayed by my own step-family. I drove home in a downpour, the rain hammering the windshield in rhythm with my rage. The house, Dad's house, now mine, felt colder than usual as I stepped inside. Shadows loomed in every corner. I hadn't changed much since moving in. I found comfort in the familiar. The worn carpets, his books on the shelf, the faint smell of pine cleaner he always used. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, heart pounding, thoughts racing. Feeble plans formed and unraveled, just as quickly. Regret gnawed at me. I had failed him, failed to protect what he built, failed to see the betrayal coming in time. Unless there was still something I hadn't seen. Something left behind. By morning, though sleep-deprived, I felt a sharp clarity. I called in sick, a first for me, and spent the early hours wandering through the house. There was one place I had avoided since the funeral, Dad's office. The door creaked open, releasing a wave of stale air and dust. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, catching particles floating like tiny spirits. Everything remained untouched. His favorite fountain pen still lay perfectly parallel to his leather-bound planner. The worn desk chair sat slightly pulled out, just as he'd left it. I eased into the chair, fingers brushing over the smooth mahogany surface. He'd sat here late into the night, solving impossible problems, keeping the company alive during crisis after crisis. What would he do now? One part of me scolded. He'd never have let it get this far. But a gentler voice reminded me. He had been blindsided before, too. And yet, he always found solutions. "Look deeper," he'd always say. The answer isn't on the surface. The desk had been in the family for generations. It was massive, with dozens of tiny drawers and ornate compartments. I began opening each one, searching for something, anything, that might give me a clue. Most drawers held the usual: paper clips, receipts, ancient post-it notes. But when I pulled out the bottom right drawer, something felt wrong. It didn't go as deep as it should. I emptied it completely and pressed against the wooden bottom, recalling how he once showed me how antique furniture sometimes contained hidden spaces. Click, a soft mechanism released, revealing a slim compartment beneath. Inside was a single cream-colored envelope, my name written across it in my father's unmistakable handwriting. I called in sick for the first time in my entire career. I needed space to think, away from the toxic atmosphere the office had turned into. As I moved quietly through my father's house, now legally mine, I became aware of one room I'd carefully avoided ever since his passing: his home office. The old door groaned slightly as I pushed it open, sending swirls of dust into the golden morning light. Everything was untouched, frozen in time since that final morning. His papers were neatly aligned, his favorite fountain pen resting exactly parallel to his well-worn leather planner, the creased chair pushed in just right. Since the funeral, I hadn't been able to bring myself to disturb these everyday relics of his routine. I sat in his chair, tracing my fingers over the polished mahogany surface where he had spent countless sleepless nights working through impossible problems. What would he have done if he were in my shoes? He would never have let the situation collapse so far, my inner critic snapped. But then another gentler thought emerged. He too had endured crises, and he always found answers no one else could see. Look deeper, he used to say when we'd work through complex challenges together. The solution's never sitting on the surface. The desk had been in our family for 3 generations. Towering and solid, it held countless tiny drawers and compartments. My father treasured it, for its construction, its history, and the secrets it might hold. I started going through the drawers one by one, unsure of what exactly I hoped to find, but needing to reconnect with how he thought. The top drawers were predictable: paper clips, receipts, business cards, old notes from long-forgotten meetings. Then I opened the bottom right drawer. Something was off. It didn't go back as far as it should have, considering the depth of the desk. I emptied its contents and ran my palm along the wooden bottom. Then I remembered something. Dad once told me antique desks often hid compartments. I pressed on the panel gently, fingers searching for any give. Suddenly, click. A soft mechanism triggered. The floor of the drawer shifted upward slightly, revealing a narrow hidden compartment underneath. With a soft click, the false bottom popped free, revealing a narrow hidden compartment. Inside there was only one thing: a cream-colored envelope, aged slightly, with my name written in my father's unmistakable handwriting. Beneath my name were the chilling words, "To be opened on the day they try to take everything from you." My hands trembled as I broke the seal. "My dearest Morgan," it began. And just like that, I could almost hear his voice, calm and steady, guiding me through the storm. "If you're reading this, then my worst fears have been realized. Elaine and her children have revealed their true intentions, toward you and toward the company. I had hoped that time would build genuine family ties, but I've seen how they treat you when they think no one's watching. Their kindness is a performance. Their dismissal of your ideas, calculated. I've witnessed this behavior in other dealings of theirs. I wanted to believe in the best version of them, but I'm not naive. The prenuptial agreement I signed with, Elaine safeguarded the assets I had before we married, but it did require that I provide for her and her children in my will. What's happening now is exactly the scenario I prepared for. Morgan, you are the true heir to Bennett Technologies, not just by blood, but by heart, vision, and ability. You've always understood that a company is more than numbers and projections. It's people, ideas, purpose. That's why I set things up for you to inherit what matters most: control. Reach out to Lawrence Geller at Geller & Associates. He holds documents for a blind trust that owns 51% of Bennett Technologies' voting shares. You are the sole beneficiary. That trust becomes active the moment this letter is presented to him. I did this for 2 reasons. First, to shield the company from a hostile takeover or betrayal, exactly like what's happening now. Second, and more importantly, to give you space to prove yourself on your own. And you have. Your commitment, your ideas, your leadership, I've watched all of it. You've earned this. Remember what I always told you. Ownership isn't about documents. It's about purpose, responsibility, and heart. You already own Bennett Technologies in all the ways that matter. Now it's time to make it official. With love and confidence always, Dad. I read the letter 3 times. By the third, tears streamed freely. Relief, validation, grief. He had seen it coming. He had planned for it. He had protected me. Hands shaking, I dialed Geller's office. He was in court for the day. I left an urgent message, then paced the house with the letter clutched tight. What if something went wrong? What if there was a legal loophole? What if the trust wasn't solid? And worst of all, what if it was too late to stop the Reynolds deal? At 7:30 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Morgan, Lawrence Geller here. Just got your message. Based on what you've said, we shouldn't wait until morning. Can you come to my home tonight? This isn't something we should discuss over the phone. An hour later, I was in his book-lined study as he unlocked a wall safe hidden behind a painting. Apparently, hiding important things behind art was a family trait. He pulled out a thick folder stamped Bennett Trust and placed it gently in front of me. Your father established this 5 years ago, Geller said, flipping it open. He transferred 51% of his shares into the trust with explicit succession instructions. The arrangement is airtight and was kept confidential by design. Why didn't you tell me this after he died? I asked. He looked at me steadily. The terms were strict. You were to be informed only upon presenting his letter or if certain triggering events occurred, like an unauthorized attempt to sell the company without board approval. He slid several documents across the desk. These make your controlling interest official, effective immediately upon signature. The emergency board meeting is Friday. With this paperwork filed first thing in the morning, not only will you be allowed in that room, you'll control the outcome. He smiled, genuine and rare. Richard spoke of you often. He believed in you. He just wanted you to build your path before stepping into his. As I signed the documents, the gravity of it settled on me. This wasn't just about blocking Elaine's schemes. It wasn't just about saving the company. This was about honoring the legacy my father built by leading the way he did, with integrity and vision. There's one more thing, Geller said, handing me a final sheet. Your father recorded a video message to be played to the board in case this exact situation unfolded. The file's secured with my firm. I left Geller's house close to midnight, mind racing. I had less than 36 hours to prepare for the biggest showdown of my life. But for the first time since he died, I felt my father's presence, not as a memory, but as a force, still protecting me, still guiding me, still believing in me, and I wasn't going to let him down. I barely slept. By dawn, I was at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, legal pad open. This wouldn't be as easy as showing up with paperwork. I needed allies, evidence, proof of what they'd done. My first call was to Thomas Wright. I need to see you before work, I said. It's urgent. We met at a quiet diner far from the office, where I slid Geller's documentation across the table. Thomas read through the papers, his eyebrows climbing higher with each page. Richard, you magnificent bastard, he finally murmured, looking up at me with a grin. He outplayed them all. Did you know about this? No, but I'm not. Surprised. Your father was always 10 steps ahead. He tapped the documents thoughtfully. This changes everything, but we need to be strategic. If Elaine gets wind of this before the meeting, she'll try to find some way to block you. That's why I need your help, and Diana's. After breakfast, I called Diana and asked her to meet us at Thomas's house during lunch. Her reaction to the news mirrored Thomas's shock, followed by vindicated delight. I knew something was off about the way they've been treating you, she said. Richard would never have left you powerless in the company. With my 2 strongest allies on board, we divided responsibilities. Thomas would quietly gather comprehensive financial data showing the company's true value versus what Reynolds was offering, information that had been withheld from most board members. Diana would compile evidence of my stepfamily's systematic campaign to undermine me and push me out. My task was perhaps the most difficult. I needed to understand exactly what the Reynolds Corp deal entailed and how it would harm Bennett Technologies. I need access to the merger documents, I told them. Diana frowned. They're being kept under extreme secrecy. Even I haven't seen them. But I think I know who has, Thomas said. Zachary Miller in IT. He set up the secure server where they're stored. He's always been loyal to your father. Zachary had joined the company as an intern during my father's early days and had risen to head our cybersecurity division. He taught me to code when I was in high school, patiently explaining concepts until they clicked. If anyone would help me access restricted documents without raising alarms, it would be him. I found Zachary in his usual spot, the company cafeteria at 2:30 p.m., long after the lunch rush, enjoying a late sandwich while reading science fiction, on his tablet. Mind if I join you? I asked, sliding into the seat across from him before he could answer. His eyes darted nervously around the nearly empty cafeteria. Morgan, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Brandon's been explicit about limiting contact with you. That's actually why I'm here. I kept my voice low. I know they've been hiding things from me, Zach. Important things about the future of Dad's company. I can't discuss details, but did you know they're selling to Reynolds Corp? His sandwich stopped halfway to his mouth. How did you? I have my sources. What you may not know is Reynolds' history of destroying the companies they acquire. This isn't a merger, Zach. It's a corporate execution. Showed him articles on my phone about Reynolds' previous acquisitions, the layoffs, the asset stripping, the bankruptcies that followed. Your department would be among the first cut, I told him. Reynolds outsources all IT functions to reduce costs. I could see the conflict in his expression. What do you want from me, Morgan? I need to see the merger documents. The real ones, not whatever sanitized version they're showing the board. He hesitated, then sighed. I could lose my job. You'll definitely lose your job if Reynolds takes over. That night, after most employees had left, Zachary gave me access to a secure terminal in a rarely used server room. You have 2 hours before the system log's maintenance is complete, he warned. After that, the access records will update automatically. What I found in those files confirmed my worst fears. The merger was actually a complete acquisition with a 3-phase implementation plan. Phase 1 maintained the appearance of Bennett Technologies as a separate entity while transferring intellectual property rights to Reynolds subsidiaries. Phase 2 replaced key personnel, including every member of my creative team, with Reynolds employees. Phase 3 dissolved the original company structure entirely, moving any remaining valuable assets to Reynolds and discarding the shell. Most shocking were the personal side agreements. Elaine would receive a $5 million consulting fee for facilitating the deal. Brandon was guaranteed a senior VP position at Reynolds, with a substantial salary increase. Even Ashley had negotiated a settlement. She would retain exclusive rights to the company's social media properties and client lists, which she could then sell to competitors. I downloaded everything to an encrypted drive, my anger growing with each document. This wasn't just business. This was betrayal of everything my father had built and everyone who had helped him build it. The next morning, I met with Lawrence Geller to review all the evidence we had gathered. This is more than enough to block the merger, he confirmed. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders that these side deals clearly violate. What about my stepfamily? Can they be removed from their positions? With your controlling interest, yes. But I'd advise caution. Moving too aggressively could create legal complications. Let's focus first on stopping the Reynolds deal and establishing your control. Leadership changes can follow in due course. We spent hours preparing formal documents asserting my ownership and objecting to the merger. Geller coached me on the legal terminology I would need to use and the specific procedures for calling votes. As evening approached, doubt began creeping in. Despite all our preparation, I would be facing my stepfamily alone in that boardroom, the same people who had systematically undermined and excluded me for months, people who believed they were about to secure a massive payday at the expense of the company. What if they refused to acknowledge the trust documents? I asked Geller. What if they find some legal maneuver to block me? That's why I'll be accompanying you tomorrow, he said firmly. Your father paid me very well to ensure his wishes would be carried out. I don't intend to let him down. That night, alone in my father's house, I stood in his office, holding the letter that had changed everything. Tomorrow would determine not just my future, but the future of hundreds of employees who depended on Bennett Technologies. My father had prepared me for this moment, but the final step was mine, to take a loan. "I hope I'm ready, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. The silence that answered somehow felt like confirmation. Friday morning dawned clear and bright, a sharp contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I dressed with particular care, my father's favorite navy suit of mine, pearl earrings he had given me for my college graduation, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon that meant business. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not just myself, but glimpses of him. The determined set of the jaw, the clear-eyed focus that had intimidated countless negotiating partners. Game day, I told my reflection. Lawrence Geller met me in the lobby of Bennett Technologies headquarters at 8:30 a.m., looking every inch the high-powered attorney in his tailored suit and carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my first car. Ready? As I'll ever be. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt interminable. When the doors finally opened, I spotted Thomas waiting near the boardroom, his expression carefully neutral in case of watching eyes. "They're all inside," he murmured as we approached. Reynolds sent 3 executives. Elaine's been charming them for the past 15 minutes, and the board members, mostly confused. They were only told this morning that this is about a potential merger. The full details haven't been shared. At the boardroom door, I took a deep breath, nodded to Geller, and reached for the handle, only to find my way blocked by Brandon's imposing figure as he stepped outside. His eyes narrowed at the sight of me. "Morgan, this is a surprise." "Is it? I do still work here. This meeting is restricted. Board members and shareholders only." His voice carried just enough volume to be heard by those inside, establishing his authority. I maintained a neutral expression, despite the anger flaring inside me. "I'm well aware of the meeting's purpose, Brandon." "Then you understand why you're not invited." His smirk was subtle but unmistakable as he moved to physically block the doorway. "Sorry, this is for shareholders only." The moment crystallized everything. Months of being dismissed, systematically excluded, watching them plot to sell off my father's legacy for their own gain. I thought I'd feel rage. Instead, I felt calm because I had something Brandon didn't, something that changed everything. I smiled and pulled out my phone. Perfect timing. "Let's announce who really owns this company." The look on Brandon's face, pure confusion, was priceless. Before he could respond, Geller stepped forward, extending a card. "Lawrence Geller, Geller and Associates. I represent Miss Bennett, majority shareholder of Bennett Technologies via the Richard Bennett Trust. We're here for the board meeting." Brandon's face turned red. "What the hell are you talking about? There's no trust. I've seen the will." "Then perhaps check with your legal team," Geller said smoothly. "The documents were filed with the SEC this morning." Brandon looked like he might physically block the door, but Thomas stepped forward, CFO authority radiating from his stance. "Is there a problem here?" Brandon faltered, then moved aside reluctantly. "This is irregular. Mother won't like it." "I'm counting on it," I said quietly, walking past him into the boardroom. The room fell silent as every head turned. Elaine sat in Dad's old seat, surrounded by 3 suited Reynolds Corp executives. Ashley was nearby, feigning boredom, until she saw me. Her eyes widened. "Morgan," Elaine said with fake sweetness. "This is a closed meeting, dear. Brandon should have told you." "He did," I replied, standing tall as Geller opened his briefcase. "But I have every right to be here." One of the Reynolds execs glanced at his watch. "Mrs. Bennett, perhaps we should reschedule." "No need," I cut in. "You'll want to hear this before any merger talks continue." Elaine's mask slipped. "That's enough. Security?" Geller calmly handed out folders. "Before anyone calls security, please review these documents. They confirm Ms. Morgan Bennett as the controlling shareholder via the Richard Bennett Trust, 51% of all voting shares." Gasps rippled as folders were opened. Elaine snatched hers, flipping through pages with growing panic. "This is impossible." "Richard left me 40%. I have the will." The will distributed 49% of shares, Geller said, unbothered. The majority was placed in trust 5 years ago, with specific instructions for succession. I stepped into the center of the room. All eyes on me, just like they used to be on my father. My father established this trust not just for control, but to protect the future of Bennett Technologies. He chose me as beneficiary because I share his vision. I pulled a letter from my folder. He also left this for me to read the day they tried to take everything. Silence. I read aloud. Morgan, you are the true heir to Bennett Technologies, not just in name, but in spirit. You understand that a company is about people, ideas, purpose, not just balance sheets. I looked to the Reynolds executives. Gentlemen, there will be no merger. Not today. Not ever, while I hold controlling interest. Arthur Reynolds leaned forward, calm but curious. Miss Bennett, this is unexpected. But perhaps we can discuss the benefits. I know your benefits, I said, nodding to Thomas. He handed out our own set of documents, including asset stripping, layoffs, and dissolving the company within 18 months. Murmurs of shock spread. I've also included side agreements signed by Elaine, Brandon, and Ashley. Agreements that violate their duty to this company. Elaine stood furious. These were obtained illegally. Private negotiations. Actually, Thomas cut in, as CFO, I should have been part of those talks. The fact that I wasn't, a governance violation. Brandon, unusually quiet, suddenly slammed the table. This is a trick, legal sleight of hand. My mother is Richard's widow. He wouldn't have kept this from her. Wouldn't he? I asked, my voice low. He built this company to protect people, 300 employees who'd lose their jobs under your deal. I walked to the projector, inserted a flash drive Geller gave me, and pressed play. My father's face filled the screen. If you're watching this, he said, the trust has been activated. Morgan is now majority shareholder. His voice was strong, determined. I did this not out of distrust, but love. For my daughter, for this company, and for its people. To Elaine, Brandon, and Ashley. I provided for you in my will. But if this is being played, you've chosen a different path. He stared into the camera. Morgan controls Bennett Technologies now. Work with her or step aside. The room was silent when the video ended. Elaine looked shattered. Maybe she hadn't known. Maybe Dad had seen something in her I'd ignored. Arthur Reynolds cleared his throat, signaling his team. It seems we were misled. We're withdrawing our proposal. A wise choice, I said, though I believe the board would have rejected it regardless. I turned to them. I move we formally reject Reynolds Corporation's offer and reaffirm our independence. Thomas seconded immediately. As majority shareholder, I continued, I call for a vote. Unanimous. Even my stepfamily abstained. A quiet win. Not reconciliation, but truth. As the meeting ended, board members approached me, shaking hands, asking about the future. Brandon and Ashley left without a word. Elaine lingered. You think you've won? She said softly. This wasn't about winning. It was about protecting what Dad built. She gave a bitter smile. Richard always underestimated me, and overestimated you. She turned to leave. Let's see how long you last when you actually have to run the company. And just like that, she was gone. Dignity intact, but shaken. The war was over, but the real challenge had just begun. I had claimed my place at the head of Bennett Technologies. Now came the real test, proving I deserved it. The hours after the Yike board meeting blurred together in a whirlwind of decisions. The news of my ownership rippled through the company like a shockwave, shifting the mood from tense whispers to breathless anticipation. I secluded myself in my my office with Thomas, Diana, and Geller to handle urgent fallout. Elaine's already cleared out her things, Thomas reported, returning from the chairwoman's office. Brandon and Ashley are doing the same. Resigning? I asked, caught off guard by their speed. Not officially, but they're making a statement. They expect you to fire them. I paused, then said, let them sit on it over the weekend. We have bigger priorities, and we did. We drafted a company-wide announcement explaining the leadership change, followed by carefully worded reassurance to our major clients. I called an emergency meeting with PR to brace for media blowback. By late afternoon, I met with Department I, heads to steady nerves. The merger is off the table, I told them. There will be no layoffs. No restructurings done for appearance. Bennett Technologies stays independent, true to my father's vision. Some looked relieved. Others, those who had aligned with Brandon, wore cautious skepticism. I made sure to speak directly to one of them. I respect loyalty, I said, but my priority is this company's future, not revenge. If you perform, you stay. It's that simple. As dusk settled, I was alone again in the office, papers strewn across the desk. Trust documents, financials Thomas had tracked independently, hidden from Elaine's doctored reports. A knock pulled me from my thoughts. It was Diana, coat over. Her arm. Quite a day, she said, smiling. How are you holding up? Still sinking in, I admitted. Doesn't feel real yet. Well, the flood of emails I've fielded says otherwise. People are relieved, Morgan. The Reynolds rumors had people updating resumes. How bad was morale? Bad, she said. Your father made people feel valued. That's been fading. Since he died, I finished. She nodded. And since Elaine and Brandon stepped in, now everyone wants to know, what happens Monday? So did I. Monday, I said. We rebuild. I'll need your help. After she left, I stayed behind, sketching the first blueprint of my leadership, my first big decision, naming an interim. CEO. I wasn't ready to take on that role directly, not yet, not with so much to learn. I asked Thomas to step in temporarily. His calm experience would offer needed stability. Just until we finalize a leadership structure, I said. Your father would have respected your caution, he replied. The weekend passed in a blur of planning. By Monday, I was focused, resolute. And just like that, Elaine, Brandon, and Ashley didn't show. Only Elaine bothered to send an email citing an extended leave. Board members had mixed feelings. Some worried about the abrupt optics, others looked visibly relieved. They're trying to bait you, Thomas warned. Either fire them and risk legal trouble or grovel and lose authority. Let's disappoint them, I said. Document everything. Follow HR policy, but otherwise, we move forward. So we did. Each morning began with executive briefings. We halted Reynolds' merger prep and shifted focus to growth. Afternoons I spent walking through departments, re-establishing open channels my father once championed. Most employees greeted the high, change with cautious hope. Many remembered me from my days rising through the ranks, someone who knew their struggles. The newer hires, loyal to Elaine's regime, were more watchful, waiting to see if I'd last. Then came the first real storm. In week 2, we discovered Ashley had been quietly downloading proprietary data, client lists, strategy documents, before leaving. If shared with competitors, the damage would be severe. After consulting with legal, I made a hard call. We issued a cease and desist. If she didn't return the data and delete all copies, we'd sue. Her response? A social media smear campaign, painting me as a villain who'd stolen her mother's company through backroom scheming. Her posts gained traction fast. Let me take care of it, Diana said. You responding only adds fuel. She crafted a calm, measured company statement, emphasizing our commitment to innovation and integrity. Meanwhile, our legal team compiled undeniable proof of Ashley's theft. When her lawyer saw the evidence, Ashley backed down. The post stopped, but the hurt lingered. I thought she might be different, I told Thomas during a late dinner. When we were younger, she seemed like she wanted a sister. Power doesn't change people, he said. It reveals who they really are. I redirected my energy towards something that had always grounded me. Product innovation. My once vibrant, creative department had been gutted by Elaine and Brandon. Morale was in shambles. I met with the team and reactivated our flagship project, one I had championed long before, Project Phoenix. We're launching Phoenix, I announced in an all-hands 6 weeks into my leadership. It's our new identity and our future. The name wasn't accidental. It symbolized our rebirth. Phoenix had once been shelved under Brandon, dismissed as too ambitious, but I believed in it. It combined revolutionary encryption with user-friendly design, perfect for small and medium businesses to secure financial data. With funding restored, the team returned to it with passion. They worked long hours, solving problems Brandon had ignored. I spent as much time with them as possible, not just overseeing, but supporting. Of course, it wasn't all smooth. One week, a key client threatened to walk. A separate software bug delayed a major release. Alone in the office one night, I stared at my father's photo. "I don't know if I can do this, Dad," I whispered. But by morning, I had clarity. I found creative solutions, leaned on trusted advisors, and kept the company steady. That was when I truly learned, leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about building a team that can solve anything, together. 2 months after the boardroom standoff, we got our first win. At the National Financial Security Conference, our Phoenix demo stunned the industry. Reviewers praised its interface and security. Orders flooded in. "You've done what Richard dreamed of," Thomas said. "Not just products, real innovations." With the company gaining stability, I turned toward emotional closure. Brandon eventually handed in his formal resignation. He accepted a job with a competitor, but it fizzled out. Elaine negotiated a settlement to cash out her shares. Geller hesitated when I told him to move forward. "You don't owe her anything," he said. "It's not about debt," I replied. "It's about releasing this company and myself from her influence." 6 months in, we presented our quarterly numbers. Revenue, up 22% year-over-year. Client retention, jumped from 78% to 94%. Employee satisfaction, back to levels before Elaine.Phoenix. Exceeding sales projections by 30%. As I wrapped up my presentation, the board member who had resisted me the most, an old-school investor loyal to Elaine, spoke up. I believe I speak for all of us when I say, Richard would be extraordinarily proud. You haven't just steadied the ship, you've steered it toward greater waters than we imagined. That evening, I visited my father's grave for the first time since his funeral. I brought a bottle of his favorite scotch, poured 2 glasses, one for me, one for him. "We did it, Dad," I said, clinking the glass against the stone. "Bennett Technologies is thriving again. I wish you could see it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, peace settled over me, deeper than I'd known in years. The company was safe. The people were secure. His legacy would live on, and mine had finally begun, not as Richard Bennett's daughter, but as a leader in my own right. A year after the boardroom showdown that reshaped my future, I stood before the entire Bennett Technologies team at our annual celebration. From the podium, I scanned the crowd. Some faces were ones I recognized. From childhood visits to Dad's office, others were new, having joined under my leadership. But all of them represented the beating heart of a company that had not just weathered a storm, but soared through it. When my father founded Bennett Technologies 27 years ago, I began, his goal was simple: create technology that improved lives and do it in a workplace where people mattered more than titles. Today, we were doing more than living that dream. We were building on it. In the 6 months since taking control, we'd seen real, tangible results. Consistent growth, bold innovation, and a cultural revival. The Phoenix platform had not only stabilized our operations, it had become the gold standard for financial security, winning industry accolades and breaking profit records. We'd opened a new development hub, brought on 43 new team members, and rolled out a long-overdue employee profit-sharing initiative, an idea my father had loved but never implemented. After my speech, as everyone mingled and celebrated with family, Thomas came over, champagne in hand. "Richard would have loved this," he said, glancing around at the cheerful chaos. "The company strong, the future bright, and his daughter, leading the way." "Almost everything he wanted," I replied. Still working on the family part, because despite the professional victories, the scars of betrayal hadn't fully faded. After that boardroom reckoning and the legal settlements, that followed, my relationship with Elaine, Brandon, and Ashley remained cold and distant. Civil, but strained. But 2 weeks after the celebration, I did something unexpected, even to myself. I invited Elaine to lunch. We met at a neutral, upscale restaurant halfway between her new place and my office. The atmosphere was tense as we sat down, traded small talk, and ordered. Once the waiter left, I broke the silence. "I didn't ask you here to rehash old wounds," I said. "What's done is done. But I've been thinking about Dad, and I don't think he'd want this Cold War dragging on." Elaine studied me, her expression unreadable, calculated, as always. "What are you proposing, Morgan?" "Not a fake. Truce. Not some mother-daughter performance. Just peace. Acknowledgement. That we're connected, whether we like it or not." "And Brandon? Ashley?" she asked, swirling her wine. "They're included, though I doubt Brandon's interested." She sighed. Brandon took the Reynolds fallout personally. That executive role they promised never materialized. And Ashley, she's engaged, moving to California. Elaine hesitated. "She's asked about the company. I think she regrets how it ended." We stuck to neutral subjects after that, politely avoiding landmines. It wasn't warm, but it was a start, an inch closer than enemies. Brandon, as predicted, rejected the gesture. The company he joined laid off half its staff just 6 months later, and he ended up in a smaller firm with half the prestige. When we crossed paths at industry events, we exchanged only polite nods. Ashley surprised me. Before her move, you met for coffee. She apologized, awkwardly, but earnestly. "I got caught up in their version of events," she admitted. "It was easier than thinking for myself." "We all make decisions with limited information," I replied. "The question is whether we grow from them." The reconciliation was slow and cautious, but honestly, it wasn't my priority anymore. The real transformation was happening inside me. Running Bennett Technologies had become more than survival. It became a crucible. I had learned to trust my gut, lean into my vision, and stay open to advice without losing myself. I discovered resilience I never knew I had. My leadership style wasn't a copy of my father's. It was something new. Empathetic but firm. Collaborative but focused. Driven by values he taught me, but defined by choices that were mine. The most powerful feedback didn't come from our financials or the industry press. It came from our culture, from employees telling me they felt seen again, trusted again. From an environment that had once been poisoned by secrecy and favoritism, now thriving with transparency and meritocracy. On the anniversary of Dad's passing, I launched the Richard Bennett Innovation Grant, a fund to support bold, experimental ideas that might never get greenlit through traditional channels. The first grant went to a junior coder who'd proposed adaptive security protocols. A year later, that prototype would become our next big product. "Your father would approve," Diana told me that day. "He always believed the best ideas don't just come from the top." "I'm just trying to build the company he dreamed of," I said. She smiled. "No, you're building the company you dream of." And that's what he would have wanted. Her words stayed with me, reshaping how I saw everything. For so long, I'd tried to honor Dad's legacy by walking his path. But now I realized I wasn't continuing his legacy. I was evolving it. Bennett Technologies wasn't just his company anymore. It was mine too. That insight sparked one of the most defining decisions of my journey. After months of reflection and conversations with the board, I accepted the official title of CEO. Thomas, ever the steady mentor, transitioned to chairman, my first act as CEO, to formalize something I had already been practicing, a leadership model based not on hierarchy, but on earned authority. Ownership isn't about paperwork, I told my team. It's about vision, responsibility, and heart. I pushed that principle across the company, from the C-suite to entry-level roles. We implemented team-driven decision-making, open communication, and peer-nominated recognition systems. The payoff was unmistakable. Employee retention hit a historic high. Innovation skyrocketed. People no longer feared failure. They embraced creative risks. Our reputation shifted from stable player to trailblazer, drawing in top talent and groundbreaking partnerships. 18 months after that unforgettable boardroom confrontation, I stood in my office, still my father's in some ways, but now filled with signs of me. Photos, books, awards, sticky notes scribbled with ideas. The company was thriving. Our people were inspired. And me? I had stepped into my own. Not as the daughter who inherited control, but as a leader who had earned every ounce of trust that came with it. The most important lesson I learned didn't come from any quarterly report or strategic planning session. It came from facing doubt, my own and others. It came from standing my ground when it would have been easier to retreat. My father gave me the tools, the chance, but the courage, that was mine. That afternoon, I walked into the boardroom to present our international expansion strategy, an ambition Dad never quite reached. Before I began, I looked at the framed photo of him on my desk and whispered, "We're just getting started, Dad." And as I spoke with clarity, passion, and vision, I knew this truth deep in my bones. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't in trusts or wills. It's in the belief someone placed in you, and the belief you learn to place in yourself. Have you ever had to stand your ground when others tried to push you aside? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the hardest battles shape the strongest versions of us. If this story resonated with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their inner strength. Thanks for listening, and remember, your worth is never defined by those who fail to see it.